talking about something that might change your perspective on the world forever. So make sure you stay tuned till the end because we're going to be talking about really what is the manifestation of the reality that we see around us. You know, there's been a lot of theories out there about the way that the cosmos works. You know, simulation theory, for example. People say the Matrix or whatever. I think there's a little bit of truth in everything. So we're going to be exploring part of that concept today, which is really based on this concept that the left brain, which science has thoroughly studied, has been found to work in terms of very direct forms of thinking, such as on, off, left, right, up, down, black, white, and these kind of very switch-like conceptualizations, similar to computer code, which is based on ones and zeros, right? Binary code. So, one of the fundamental things to understanding the world based on this notion or this conceptualization is that if we are in this code, the Matrix, whatever you want to call it, then almost like Neo, you must be able to transform the code around you so you can manifest or create the reality you want. So I'm going to explain the key concept of that today, which is not just explaining the Matrix, but explaining the most important thing about the Matrix or inside it, which is the backdoor. And a backdoor, in terms of computer coding, is something that is typically designed by the developers of the program to allow for a kind of exit or entry that is essentially like almost tunneling out of the simulation. So let's get started here. So let's start here so we have this concept, left brain, left hemisphere, operates on codings 1 and 0. So language, for example, language is code. It's built on some kind of coding in a sense where a word translates to a meaning, and sure, some words have alternate meanings or multiple meanings or whatever, but typically they overlap a lot. But essentially when you're reading, you're actually scanning code with your eyes, and then your perception is feeding that information to the brain, which is interpreting that code so you can recreate whatever was written down. And this is a way of sending information really through time. So that's why reading is actually pretty important, because you're reading code. You're not just looking at words and suddenly you know what they mean. You're deciphering code that somebody has written down. Same thing with calculation, like math. We're talking about analyzing what a number means or a value. You're operating on this value system where a number translates into something or a variable translates into something. Analytics. So another fundamental aspect of the left brain, analyzation of something. Is this switch on or off? Does this mean I should do this or do that? And this is where this kind of dualistic perspective comes in with things like the multiverse, whatever. You have this mechanistic way of looking at the world where you make decisions, right? So, in essence, that's the concept of the left brain. The right brain, which is not so much of a factor in what we're going to be talking about here today, but understanding the brain or the mind as a whole is imperative to understanding how these both work together. So instead of ones and zeros, it's imaginative, right? All imagery, visual interpretation. So things like drawing, art, which is something that is open to interpretation or is based on who's looking at it, right? And that's why a lot of people find beauty in things like art, because it's so open to interpretation. Same thing with like looking at things like literature. This is the other part of reading, which is the interpretation, especially when you're looking at something that is a storyline, right? Visuals. One person might look at a painting, see one thing, somebody might see something completely different because it's not something that is directly translatable into one meaning. It has many different to the perspective of the individual, right? So perspective, self-explanatory, really. So this is direct here on the left brain. This is abstract here on the right brain. So when we're talking about making choices, we're talking about this dualistic framework to the reality or the existence we see around us. We're talking about making choices, making decisions in the material world, which affects things in the code. So this kind of explains the multiverse theory, the concept of parallel Earths. We're talking about changing one variable in a code. Like you see here, you see the code, you change one of the ones to a 0 or one of the zeros to a 1. Suddenly you have a completely different Earth. And depending on where that 1 or 0 is changed, it could change the entire timeline, the entire reality. So this is really where the multiverse theory comes from in terms of this dualistic perspective of making decisions in the material world, which in turn changes the reality around it. So parallel Earths, and you can think of parallel Earths as almost, if you've watched my other video that I talked about, I believe it was what is a wormhole, and I talked about the explanation of this where I talked about spatial dimensions. But essentially, the concept of parallel Earths is almost like you have boxes, or squares rather, or some kind of two-dimensional shape, which are overlapping each other, but there's no other dimension, higher dimension connecting them to each other. So they're parallel, they overlap. Parallel, as we know from math, means that two lines are going in the same direction at the same angle, which means that those lines will never meet. They will never find a cross-sectional position. They will never overlap. They will always move in the same direction, the same distance apart from each other. So that's why going into some form of hyperspace, which we'll talk about over there, and hyperspace essentially means going into a higher dimension. That's why it's called hyperspace, because you're going into a higher space. You're adding another dimension. Here, this is a two-dimensional object. This like 3/4 of a box-shaped object that are layered over each other. And if you add another dimension to this box, you would have basically, instead of a square-like object, you would have a cube-shaped object. And with that cube-shaped dimension, that third dimension, there would be a line that goes from this point through to these other points, and you can access the parallel aspects, because now you have a dimension that bridges the connection. So that's that. And just remember, when we're talking about these concepts, that it's very fundamental that everything you see around you might not even be real, considering that there are infinite number of Earths out there, that this, regardless of whatever Earth you're on, whatever timeline, whatever spatial dimension, it is not the fundamental basis of reality. The fundamental basis of reality would have to be something that is perhaps either non-existent or based on something such as a singularity. Singularity in a singularity is an infinite point of energy that is derived from one dimension. So, in essence, we'll get into that. So, I want you to see this diagram of this. So it really comes down to finding out where in this reality, like whether that's that's energetically or at some form of consciousness, where is the back door? Where is the place in reality or in energy that will allow you to tunnel through these higher dimensions? Where is the back door? Where is the aspect or the part of the code that will allow you to exit this version of reality you're in to connect you to some other parallel reality or whatever reality is outside of this one? So that's what a backdoor is. And when we talk about it in this context, we're talking really about concept of hyperspace, going in from this first person perspective. You can think of this almost as, say, this circle here at the bottom is the whole entire Earth, and this point in the center, say that's where you are on the Earth. Up here is your consciousness. So your consciousness is some immaterial third-person view that is interacting or sending information down to you on this physical plane, this first-person perspective. So you're getting signals sent from some higher dimension of consciousness, some place in hyperspace, into this lower dimensional place or lower dimensional plane, this first-person perspective. So typically this can be seen in things like physics with, what happens when you have a wormhole. You are entering at one end and essentially instantaneously coming out the other end because you're tunneling through that aspect of hyperspace which we talked about over here. So you're going through some higher dimension of space to end up out the other end, or dimension of time, or dimension. So you have three aspects. You have spatial, temporal, dimensional, and those all kind of overlap with each other, and depending on what kind of wormhole you have configured here, it could either lead you to a parallel reality, such as a parallel Earth, or another Earth, another place in space, another place in time, and all of these can overlap with each other. So you're really tapping into a different aspect of existence altogether. And this is what a wormhole is. It's a hyperspatial tunnel through space-time reality. So this is the gist of how you exit the Matrix through what is known as a backdoor. And I invite you to just contemplate this. I promise you, after thinking about this for perhaps even a day, you will notice change in your reality. Just say to yourself, everything I see around me might not even be real. And you'll notice something like when you perform a task, your actions are more precise because you realize that there's no limiting factor on you, because if this is not real, why would any limitation that exists here be real? It wouldn't. It would just be a figment of your imagination or your consciousness. So everything you see around you might not even be real. Just contemplate that for maybe a day and see what happens. I invite you to just do that, a little exercise for you. And if you do that for a day, see what happens. If you don't believe it after that, or don't think that that is anything that is real, or something that is an aspect of existence, you can just go on with your life, right? But if you contemplate this and you start to notice change around you after contemplating it, well, who knows where you might really be in the cosmos. In essence, though, my mission here is to make sure you have this information. So, if you found this video, you're likely one of the chosen ones who is destined to utilize their abilities to the very highest potential. And, a lot of times you see videos on the internet that talk about, you're the chosen one, or blah, 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 blah. It's not so much about that as reaching the realization of what this means. A lot of people will know something like this, but even fewer will understand it. Or I should say, very few people will know what this all means. Even fewer people will understand and have a clear and complete realization of what it means. And what I mean by that is there's a difference between knowing something intellectually and having it integrated into your reality. It's almost like the difference of like seeing something that changes your whole perspective on the world, seeing something that you would term as magical or, otherworldly, and something that, will change your reality forever, and then you utilizing that and creating a change based on that. A lot of people, when they see things that they can't explain, even if they say, oh, well, I've seen stuff that has changed my whole perspective on reality, a lot of people will still go back to thinking the way they did before. They will still go back to the same ideologies they had before, the same way of going about the world, same way of doing things. They won't change their behavior. They won't integrate the information. That's the word, integrate. You must integrate that information for you to fully understand what all of this means. If you see something like, I don't know, let's say somebody teleport from one place to another, and you say, oh, well, my whole view on reality has changed, or now I know that this is possible. But, you see somebody, I don't know, say for example, move something across the room with their mind or something like that. And then you say, well, essentially you say it's not outlandish to me because I've already seen this thing or whatever. But you don't change your mindset to believe that stuff can happen on a regular basis, or that stuff is fundamental to your way of perceiving the world. Then you do not really believe it on a deep level, and you will not change your behavior according to that. You will not believe in imagination. You will not believe in magic. But if you see those things and then say, okay, well, now I understand that I have to change the way I've looked at the world, and that everything I know up to this point must be reevaluated, that I must forget everything I think I know up until this point, so that I can continue on, or so that I can redevelop myself or recreate myself or go through some kind of rebirth. That is when you integrate information. So never underestimate that. Never think that you know everything. Never think that this is fundamentally the way it's always going to be, and I have nothing more to learn, because there's always something more to learn. So always move with your imagination and reality. Always move with the understanding that you must constantly redevelop or redefine what you believe is possible. And when you believe that anything is possible, when you start to believe in the impossible, that is when you can implement this kind of stuff. Because, again, like I said, it's one thing to know that this stuff is real. It's another thing to understand that at a deep level and have it integrated. So keep that in mind. Anyway, I digress. This is what I have for you today. I encourage you to like and subscribe and share this video with anybody who might find this information helpful. Anybody who is also on the path of spiritual development, or interest in physics or philosophy, conceptualizing the world around them, what have you. So, I encourage you to like and subscribe, because it really does help support the channel. And I would invite you to check out my other channel, which I'll link down below in the description, called Moonstruck, where I talk about a lot of physics concepts in longer format. I would also say follow me on Instagram at top_sorcerer if you're interested. I'm currently working on developing more aspects to social media to continue this platform on other social medias. But as I run this whole platform by myself, and I do everything from editing to creating, this stuff, to uploading, to all this stuff, promotion, what have you. I do it all myself. It does kind of become challenging to manage all on your own as one person, but nevertheless, I will continue to move forward and develop this platform. So, in essence, that is what I have for you today. That's what the Prince of Mercury has for you today on the Sword of Mercury. So once again, I encourage you to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.